Yes.
We have already 79 participants, so we can start within a minute. 80 already.
Okay, I think we can start. I think there's 80 people online. I expect there'll be more joining, 82. But to keep us more or less on time, I'd like to go ahead and start. First, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first mini-series course on our project funded by the State Department, directed at improving STEM research and graduate education in Georgia. We've got two great speakers today. These were originally intended to be face-to-face lecture-style courses. This is our adaptation to COVID and the travel situation. But I think, I expect it's going to work well, and it allows us to move forward. The program has a couple of major parts. One is the mini courses that are directed to different aspects of research, publication, communication. And this is the first of the mini course series. And then there's also the part that allows Georgian students matriculated in Georgia to work with faculty in the US and or to actually join SDSU and be matriculated in a doctoral program at SDSU. And so for more information on that, you can contact SDSU Georgia or me, and we'll be getting notices out on that. But anyway, welcome. It's great to see such a great response and have such great speakers today. The first thing I'd like to do is to welcome Mrs. Magda Magradze, Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Foundation. She was the CEO for the Millennium Challenge Account Georgia during the second compact between the US government and the Georgian government that established and supported SDSU Georgia. Currently, she is CEO of the Millennium Foundation, which is a successor of MCA. And she's also Chancellor of the new university, Kutaisi International University, which just had a successful grand opening last week. So Magda, thanks for all your support and for being here. And I'll ask you to make a few comments if you would.
Thank you, Dr. Rochelle. Good evening. First of all, if you could raise your hand if you can hear me well. Thank you. So good evening to our Georgian colleagues, and good morning to our American colleagues. I hope you all feel well in these challenging times. And thank you, Dr. Rochelle, for your kind words. It is an honor for me to welcome the audience today. We have quite a turnout, which means that the project that San Diego State University is offering in Georgia in the form of what we are doing tonight is important and is actual. So in my capacity of, from the perspective of Millennium Foundation, I would like to thank San Diego State University for partnership and support. As you all know, SDSU in Georgia has been working since 2014. We already have 5 cohort of students in 6 Bachelor of Science programs at 3 partner universities in Georgia, and with over 780 students that applied to these programs, and 2 cohorts of graduates already, majority of whom are employed successfully. San Diego State University has been very successful in Georgia, and we are very happy that partnership continues. this time funded by U.S. Embassy, U.S. Department of State. And I would like to, of course, thank our colleagues from U.S. Embassy and thank the Embassy for overall support that you provide to Georgian academia and to Georgian education sector. You already know very well that the Millennium Challenge Corporation second compact that has provided funding to San Diego State University Georgia project has been closed out last year, but we continue to work in the post-compact sustainability period. And for us, from the perspective of the government of Georgia, it is very important to see San Diego State University continue to partner with various entities in Georgia, work with various higher education institutions, and to see SDSU remain in Georgia and with Georgia as our one of our major partners in higher education sector. So once again, I would like to note the great support that SDSU has provided to our partner universities, Tbilisi State University, Ilia State University, and Georgia Technical University, as well as to other university partners. And as I know today, we have representative of various universities in Georgia that will benefit from this seminar that is now going to start soon. So once again, many thanks to you, our San Diego State University Georgia colleagues. Thanks to the US government and also government of Georgia for supporting this great endeavor. And I wish you a great seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda. We really appreciate those comments. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Christopher Anderson, the new cultural attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Georgia. Christopher recently worked in the Department of State as a special advisor for Ukraine negotiations. He also worked in our embassy in Kyiv and was the deputy head of the political section of our embassy in Yerevan. He served in Mongolia and Argentina as well, and in a number of other things. So it's great to have you here, Christopher, and thanks for coming today and saying a few things.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. We're very excited about this project. I'd like to welcome all my colleagues from the Millennium Foundation and San Diego State University as well, and then of course the students through the different universities there. Unfortunately, in this virtual period, I have not met many of you in person yet, but I hope to rectify that. But I really appreciate your flexibility in moving to an online format, because it does look like this is going to be a challenge for a while. So really appreciate your flexibility in that. I'd like to start this very briefly. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to start by explaining why we support this. What are we hoping that you guys will achieve with this? And so Georgia, of course, beautiful country, great resources, but its best resource is its people. And the people have a great history of education. They're very talented, but it has been held back by its geographic location and its history with sort of Russian Soviet domination. And so we really think this is a great opportunity to really introduce some more modern STEM research techniques and really build on the great skills that the Georgian people already have, and to strengthen the university, because all of our interventions are designed to help the Georgian people and help build a stronger strategic partner. But at the end of the day, education is the kind of intervention that has the most lasting impact. So if we can really make a change in STEM fields in Georgia, that not only will help all of you on the call here, they'll help the individual people, but it will have a long-term impact on making Georgia a innovation hub, a real capital of research and development here, and that can have a really transformative effect here in the Georgian economy, and that will help overcome this geographic challenge at the edge of Europe, surrounded by some not so accommodating neighbors, to put it diplomatically. So we really hope this program's a success, and we really want to see this succeed even in the era of COVID. And so the U.S., I would end by saying the U.S. is really supportive of this project and in general of trying to strengthen the education sphere in Georgia. So thank you very much and good luck to all of you.
Great, thank you, Christopher. And we really look forward to working with you in the days, weeks, months, years to come. As much as you move around, hopefully you'll be, be there for a while. Thanks. Next, I'd like to introduce Dean Jalil Goovan. He's the co-leader of this project and Dean of SDSU Georgia. He was a professor of mechanical engineering at San Diego State University for 15 years until 1999, and then served as rector of 3 universities in the region before coming to SDSU Georgia, where, in my opinion, he's done a fantastic job and has been a great asset in Georgia, a great colleague and person to work with, and has really put his heart and soul into SDSU Georgia and the collaboration. So, Jalil, can I ask you to say a few things?
Yes, thank you, Walt. I would like to welcome all of you, and I would like to start by thanking the United States Embassy in Tbilisi, and of course, as an extension of that, to the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, who funded SDSU Georgia project since 2014. We are here for 6 years, and we have another almost 3-4 years to graduate all the students in the program. And as Magda mentioned, we're looking forward to continued presence in Georgia beyond that as well in sustainability programs. And this particular project is one of those sustainability elements, an important one, introducing research into building research capacity into Georgian universities. We are very glad that we have now wide participation from all over Georgia. I see many universities that we have not partnered before, partnering now and joining this particular workshop. So we look forward to continued relationship with all of you in building research capacity and building faculty development for your STEM programs. As Walt mentioned, I'm stationed in Georgia. I've been here for 6 years, and I love being here. I guess this is not unique to me. For everybody that comes to Georgia falls in love with the country and the people. A lot of potential, and we hope that this kind of workshop and activity will bring it to fruition, where we'll have many activities and build innovative-based economy in Georgia. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to continuation of this series in the near future. Thank you, Walt.
Thank you, Jalil. I really appreciate that. Sorry, my daughter just hit her head, apparently. For those of you that don't know me, let me just briefly introduce myself, Walt O'Shell. I'm professor of biology at San Diego State University and an ecologist. I first really I've watched the development of SDSU Georgia from planning stages, but I really became most involved as interim dean of the College of Science. And that was a real pleasure, and really convinced me that San Diego State should have a long-term connection with Georgian people and scientists and STEM, and a long-term relationship in Georgia. So part of the initiative for this is to build on beyond the current MCC, MCA funding and contract into real long-term sustainable collaboration in research and higher education. I'm really happy to see the turnout for this first mini course. And again, this is just part of a more complete package of research mentorship from San Diego State and current state-of-the-art approaches to research funding, publication, presentation, library use, and so forth. So you'll be getting updates as we of upcoming courses, mini courses, as well as opportunities for collaboration in Georgia or in the SDSU towards PhD programs and graduate research. Before I introduce the next speaker, or the first speaker, I want to mention that this is being recorded, just so you know, and will be available to anybody that wasn't able to attend today or that wants to go back and review anything that was said. So all of the talks are being recorded, and that will be available. The other thing I want to mention is that if you have any questions of the speakers, specifically to any speaker or overall or about the program, please use the general chat and post your messages. Those will be collated and prioritized by Dr. Nodar Surgaladze, who will then pose the questions to the appropriate person. Those that we don't have enough time to answer, we'll try and provide written answers to the group. Dr. Nodar Surgaladze is a research scientist in molecular biology. He has a PhD in biophysics. He was a postdoctoral fellow at Penn State in the US, and when he returned to Georgia, served as director of the Institute of Molecular Biology and Biological Biophysics at Tbilisi State University. He then became Deputy Minister of Education and Science, and in 2014 joined the MCC-MCA project as Director of Tertiary Education, in charge of the SDSU Georgia project and technical vocational educational training. So deep background in science and education, and he'll be, as I say, posing the questions to the speakers. So our first speaker is Dr. John Crockett. John's Associate Vice President for Research Advancement at San Diego State. He maintains 2 research programs along with his administrative duties. These are linked to investigation of how diverse communities and agents interact. One is focused on the formation and function of innovative innovations. The other is focused on the effective demographic diversity in STEM, including the geosciences. John maintains an active role in education and research, is co-author of a number of books, book chapters, and in innovation, potential use of technology, roles of research development, how to really build and make innovation thrive on campus. He received his BA in Earth and Environmental Sciences from Wesleyan University, MS and PhDs in marine science, marine geology from the University of Washington. And he's given a number of very successful courses at San Diego State, both to new faculty, actually even to very senior faculty and graduate students, in being more effective in research, proposal writing, writing in general, and being successful. So he's in an excellent position and has a lot of experience in effectiveness in innovation, development, commercialization of ideas, as well as publication and proposal development. So John, with that, can I turn it over to you?
Great, thank you, Dr. O'Shell. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with everyone this evening. You know, I have to say, one of the possible advantages of doing it in this way is, as you all know, you know how these seminars get set up. Dr. O'Shell sent me a one-line email with a date that was off in the future. And I said, yeah, sure, I can do it, no problem. Because there's no activation energy for saying yes. Now,
well,
I will
you said you'd be happy to.
Now, I will say that, of course, I don't have the advantage of the, you know, of the travel time to Georgia to have prepared my comments here. You know, the other thing is, you sort of don't think into the future very well. And all I can say about my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Eric Frost, is you know, the only thing that I'm going to be able to do with my talk is stay more on time than Dr. Frost will be able to do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, share some of these slides, and we will get started. Okay, so as Dr. O'Shell said, I'm presently the Associate Vice President for Research Advancement. I am I'm at the stage in my career where I have to listen to my bio or my introductions and say, oh, wait, is that me? Okay, that's me, I'm up now. Let's go ahead and get started. So I do want to start actually by inviting any of you who have access to a keyboard or your phones right now, maybe just put in the chat a few notes about what you presently know about ISI, or the acronym of ISI, or publishing in ISI journals. I'm gonna pause for about 30 seconds, and I'll watch the chat along with Nodar. I love that the first comment came in with an interrogative, a question mark at the end of it. Is this what we're talking about? Okay. Okay. So I'll keep an eye on this as it sort of comes in, and note our, you know, if something comes in that we need to stop, just go ahead and stop me. So I'm not going to tell you too much about what you can learn from a Google search, but you know, it is this kind of indexing capacity. It's a database that's been bought and sold, created, bought, sold a number of times. But it's an outlet for kind of, you know, the most accessible of the journals in the world, and you know, multiple countries and many journals. They rely sort of heavily on this metric of impact factor. It was one of the things that was innovated during the time that the ISI journals were coming up, and you know, you can get sort of a master list of these journals here. Rather, what I'm going to do is spend the rest of my time kind of talking about what might be some core considerations for good writing in general, and of course, publication specifically in ISI journals. So the first thing that I want to highlight is good writing is good thinking. I want to clarify here, good writing is not a reflection of good thinking. The act of doing the writing is the act of thinking. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment. Of course, you're more likely to succeed in your publishing endeavors if you combine good writing with sound research. I'm going to say absolutely nothing about how to come up with good research ideas, or how to, well, I am going to say something about how to develop good methodologies, but you know, that is your responsibility as a scholar, in collaboration with your mentor, with your colleagues, with your co-authors. Keep in mind that for most ISI journals, reviewers are unpaid and review manuscripts as a professional service. The reason that I highlight this is because imagine your own attitude engaging in a new propositional publication for which you are not being compensated. The reviewers enter into the review for all of this work that you spent the last 5 years doing and developing in a really bad mood. They are doing this on a voluntary basis, and so your responsibility as the writer, as the prospective author, is to try to make their job as easy and enjoyable as possible. how well, both controlling your own emotions and sort of the technical aspects of responding to the reviewer's criticisms. And as I said, they're in a bad mood. There are going to be criticisms. That's what's going to determine whether your work finds an outlet. And just a word on impact factor, which is what I have the if there. Impact factor may be proportionate to access and visibility, but don't get married to impact factor. There are statistical quirks of how it's calculated based on sort of self-citations and some other things. Don't get married to impact factor. Do what's appropriate for your topic and your publication. Okay, moving on to a brief note on writing. And I want to give you a warning, which is when I am at the end of the next slide, not this slide, but when I'm at the end of the next slide, I'm going to ask you to take a moment and actually do an exercise. And you're just going to need a keyboard or maybe like a piece of scratch paper, but that is coming. Okay, so writing takes time for everyone. I can't even imagine the challenges of attempting to publish in a language that wasn't my first language. Many of you are going to be in that situation, but it takes time. Don't try to get around the fact that it takes time. Set aside time to do the writing. My personal recommendation is to, on your Google Calendar, put an appointment that is writing time. If it is there and established, and you're like me, I just do whatever my calendar says. Like it pops up, you know, this morning I sat down at my desk, this thing popped up, you're giving this talk. Okay, here I am, I'm giving the talk. And if something appears on my calendar at 10 o'clock after this, I'll just go do that. You're gonna write better at different times. You're gonna feel more inspired to write at different times. Keep track of yourself and give yourself those times. Are there cues that maybe will indicate, okay, now is the time that I'm writing? A particular type of beverage, music, lighting. So all of these things are actually really important factors of getting yourself to do this thing. Writing, the process of it has been shown across a bunch of different types of research and a bunch of different axes to actually make you smarter and more capable. It catalyzes thinking. And this quote here from an American author, it reveals to you what you actually think. Okay, so I'm going to share this experience with all of you, which is a brainstorming strategy called free writing. And as I said, when I get to the bottom of the slide, you're actually going to do this thing. So the idea here is that you start your writing sessions with free writing, not to produce text, but to get all of the brain neurological benefits of doing the free writing, so it's catalyzing your thinking. And here's how it works. I'm going to give you a minute and a half. I'll set it on my little timer over here. And write down, just start writing and write down everything that comes to your head. Just text on your phone, on your keyboard. When we used to do this in person, it's actually quite hilarious because professionally trained academics cannot write words without deleting them. So what you end up hearing in like a classroom or something is you hear the typing, and then you hear the deleting. So don't delete, just go forward. And if you can't think of anything to write, just write like, this guy, Dr. Crockett, science, science, science. Just write your name over and over and over again. And I know that some of our more senior scholars who may be listening to this are going to think that they shouldn't or don't have to do this. You are the ones I am specially talking to. So if you think that you are more experienced, I especially invite you to engage in this exercise. So I'm going to set aside 1.5 minutes on my timer right now. And I just want you to engage with this exercise. So free writing, write without stopping for a mere 1.5 minutes. Ready, set, begin. Okay, so that was it. That was just 1.5 minutes. And I'm gonna pop the chat up here for a moment. And I'd like you to share with me how that writing felt. And if this is, so perhaps somebody has shared in the chat what the actual free writing was, which is fabulous. That is spectacular if you actually pulled that off. These are great thoughts. But for a moment, if you can share with everyone what was sort of happening to your mind, to your body, to your emotions while you were doing this exercise. I mean, there are 100 of you or so on here. At least 20 of you tried this, right? How did this feel? Easy to start. Great. Sometimes we get stuck on what to write about. One of the things I used to do is I would talk to my phone while I was walking from my car to my office. And I would say like, I'm scared about this thing, or I'm concerned about this thing, or I don't like this person. I have a really strong negative attention bias. Just that's why I talk about all of these negative things. Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that this does is it gives you that just get over the hump to sit down and start revealing the ideas to yourself. Now, this is not a strategy for producing actual text. This is a strategy for getting yourself started. Because we know when we're writing publications, if you write like me, it's basically, I write one sentence and then, oh my God, I have to reference that. And then I spend the next 45 minutes referencing, reading, educating myself. Okay, so that exercise on a bunch of different studies is like the single best, easiest thing you can do to enhance your productivity as a writer. It is so simple. It is so straightforward, and almost none of you will do it. But for heaven's sake, my strongest recommendation for this whole evening is set aside 2 minutes every morning before you start to do something like before you check your email, for heaven's sake, but just 2 minutes and get started. Okay. So publishing in ISI journals or publishing in general is challenging and irritating. And by the time the article is accepted, you like hate your own work as much as the reviewers disliked your work. So why would we do this? So I put the whiteboard up here. And if you can put in the chat, what are some of your ideas about why you would go through this process to draft and publish in ISI journals? You had an idea, you thought you were going to learn something from this conversation. Why would you try to do this? Great. So it's dissemination, sharing your ideas, to level set your own observations, what you think you know about the world. Great, thanks for that. Get feedback, yep. The process of proximal submission, we'll talk about that in a minute. Great, okay. So contribute to knowledge, here are the aims, describe high impact research, contribute to solving problems, your own training. So the active publication, if you're an emerging scholar, is part of your training. Foster healthy competition, discovery, the importance, right? So our process of dissemination actually improves our understanding of the world or phenomena. So we want to make those contributions. And then also raise the level of classification of the author's affiliation. So specifically in some of these ISI journals, based on impact factor and some of these other metrics. So it can reflect on the institution that you're at. It can even reflect on the capacity of your geography, whether that's sort of your city or your country. And of course, going through this process reflects on your own affiliation with yourself in terms of your career advancement. So here are some of the obstacles. The ones on the left here are things that I have comments about. The ones on the right are things that all of you as scholars are going to have to take care of. So I'll run through those quickly. You have to have high standards. So you are revealing these ideas to other professionally trained scholars. They have high standards, you have to have high standards. In general, it's going to require a knowledge of publication in English, and it requires you to be offering something new. And whether it's actually something new or in a new context, the onus is on you to describe and justify the originality of the topic. So it does also require you to sort of get into the databases, the practices, the procedures that are available to you. And at the simplest level, you know, this means recovering and reading the publication guidelines for the journals that you think might be applicable to your work. So there is some effort that you just have to get in there and Google and extract the knowledge that's waiting for you. Responding to the revisions requires you to sort of control your emotions first, talk hopefully with your co-author, who will also be going through the same experience, and then having a plan to specifically respond to the revisions. And having a lens where you can evaluate, have these revisions really asked me for a massive amount of additional experimentation? Maybe I can't or don't want to do that. Maybe there's another journal that would be more appropriate. Practice, practice, practice. So become familiar with the writing style of the discipline that you're in, and have a strategy for choosing an appropriate journal for publication. And one really easy way to evaluate that is to ask yourself, what journals am I referencing in order to establish the theoretical framework for the work that I'm doing? That's always a great, great hint. Okay, so very briefly, I'm going to run through and share with you a couple of specific tools to help you in this process. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the introduction or the statement of the problem or the abstract. Different disciplines use different words, but your abstract or your introduction should have these specific things. You should frame your research question using the common rhetorical strategy that is used in every publication everywhere since Watson and Crick. What is known? This is the way things are. And what is not known? However, or we have a different take. You should clearly describe your research questions or aims, clearly describe the significance of the work, outline your hypotheses, or if it's not hypothesis-driven work, your expectations of what you're going to observe, and then allude to how you pulled this off. So the reason that I spend some additional time here on the common knowledge and the disruptor rhetorical strategy is that it must be included in your publication. And now that I have told you about it, you will see where it is in everything. So the first sentence summarizes the current common conceptions held by those who work in your research area. This is where you say what is in bounds and what is out of bounds. This is what I am addressing. The disruptor summarizes your contribution, the gap, and how you're making a contribution to it. And you will always know when this is happening because it uses one of these switching words. Less is known about, still, but, yet, although. Okay. When you prepare your publication, you have the responsibility for framing what your research is addressing. This is incredibly important because if you are imprecise about what is in play and what is out of play, then the reviewers will just bring in their own experiences and criticize you based on their perspective, not your rules of engagement. So say specifically, this addresses these 3 theoretical frameworks. We are aware of these other 2, but we are not talking about those in this publication. Make sure you're specific about how you frame it. What is the context, how it makes a difference or contribution, and this will constrain the thinking of your reviewers to focus on the things that you actually want them to focus on. Okay, I'm going to give you these 5 different approaches of identifying and sticking to a theme for your publication. And the reason that this is important is the ease with which you take your reviewers through what you want them to know is going to be reflected in the intensity of their criticisms. Good writing is good thinking, and using a model will allow the excellence of your ideas to emerge. Okay, so the first one, many of you may be familiar with the animation studio Pixar. They actually have like 23 rules of storytelling, but these are 5 that are relevant to publication. When you are writing, and when you are submitting for publication, keep in mind what is interesting to you as an audience. What would you have liked to have read in the publication that you are submitting? The reason that I emphasize this is because in all of these publications, there are pieces, there are elements that we have to include that, quite frankly, are boring even to us. But focus on what you would want to read as an audience, as a reviewer, not necessarily those details, those bits of nuance that you feel like you have to include as an author, which you do have to include. I recognize that. Okay. You won't see what the story is until you're at the end of it, and then you will have to rewrite it. Now, we all write our publications in different orders, and in fact, I don't even address in this conversation what an appropriate order might be. You will pick your own order. So for me, when I write for publication, I always start with the theoretical background, because I want to clarify for myself where I'm making a contribution. Then I do the methodology, because that's mostly from the grant application that I already submitted, and I can just kind of drop that in. And then I go to the discussion, the end of the story. What is it that I want people to know about what I've done or what I've observed? And of course, that is the most difficult part, because that is the most substantial and significant part of my discovery. But every time when I start working on the discussion, it reveals to me things that I didn't know I had been thinking about. So pick an order to address your publications. My recommendation is start closer to the end, and then you can go back and fill in how you accomplished it. Simplify, focus, keep in mind what you would like to read. Obviously, pull apart the stories that you like, pull apart the good publications in your field, not only for the sort of topical significance of what they're contributing to the field, but the structure, the tone, the approach that they've taken to telling their story, not necessarily the story yourself. And then the last one, put it down on paper. Actually start the writing. All of my stories and publications and book chapters and even these talks, I mean, half an hour before I started giving this talk, I was giving such a great talk, but you have to start the doing of it. You have to put it on paper in order to know what it is you are thinking. Okay, so if you don't like that approach, here's number 2. The point of view and the stakes. Begin with what your point of view is on the subject. Now, this is also revealed through using the status quo and disruptor rhetorical strategy. But what have you found that is now true that wasn't true before you started your work? What is the idea that you're trying to convince people of? Or what perspective are you trying to get them to form? And what are the risks or the threats to your field if this approach is not adopted? Include some stakes. Think about your audience again. So why are they here? They're here because they volunteered. What are they going to get out of it? They're making a contribution, but they're also gathering new information for themselves. And your role as the author is to make that information not only easy to find and digest, but if you can, enjoyable. How might they resist? What is the status quo? What's going to keep them from adopting your message? And then where can you find the common ground in this static conversation between your manuscript and the reviewers. Why are you here? What kind of outcomes are mutually desired? Okay, so I revealed to you that I begin with the theoretical significance. And I always begin here because I need to convince even myself that I'm actually making a contribution. So for each area that you think you are making a contribution, you have to be specific about how you are doing one of these things: filling a gap, advancing knowledge, solving debates. You don't have to be modest. If you've made a publication, if you've made a contribution that's worthy of publication, it is going to be significant. But you do have to be clear and, of course, reasonable. Okay. A third tool, and I offer this to you in tool format. I'm going to walk you through it, and then I'm going to tell you how you might use this and what it's good for. When we are considering our publications, we often have the opportunity to make contributions in multiple fields. So say, for example, your research is generally on, I don't know, let's pick something like COVID epidemiology. That's, even though none of us know anything specific about it, we all know at least something about it. So your contribution is in COVID epidemiology. Well, you may have a contribution in how to test and survey the population. So that would be field 1, test and survey. You may have a second contribution in, let's say, digital monitoring and contact tracing through cell phones. So that's like a whole second field. And maybe you've also innovated in statistical methodologies. Maybe you're doing like some quirky longitudinal statistical methodology. That's a whole other field. And the reason that we developed this tool in order to drive people to focus is because that's what happens to us. And then we try to write a publication that describes everything that we've done, and it gets, you know, major revisions requested because the journal just wants the one contribution, and maybe the second field would be a second publication. But oftentimes you can't see that this is happening unless you write it down. So here's how you would use this type of tool, right? So the 2 to 3 main fields that inform what you're trying to describe, other fields that might have influence but would make the publication too complicated to address, the specific gaps, the significance that your project will make, if there are any other impacts, and the specific research questions that you are going to answer as you go through this. Okay. Just a few words on describing your methods or your approach, or however it's described in your field. Okay. So the process of publication is a process of erosion. All publications are criticized. Some are criticized more than others. And so the objective here is to meet the criteria of the requirements for publication sufficiently so that your application is accepted and published. And because of who we are as a community, the thing that it is easiest for us to criticize is methodology. And so in order to avoid this, here are some tips on addressing the methodology. Your method should be explained in detail and justified. I used this method because I was convinced it was going to answer the questions that I've asked. If you're bringing it in from another field or combining it, you have to provide more justification. Why didn't you use this method? This is why I didn't use that method. And then link your methods to the specific evidence needed to answer the research questions. Okay, the second tool, I, in a grandiose way, call this a methods matrix. Those of you who are looking at the screen can see that it's just a grid. But if you develop this as you're developing your manuscript, you cannot go astray in describing your methods and tying them to your research questions. Okay, so in the last part of my comments, I'm going to briefly run through some thoughts about reading your own manuscript as your own reviewer and asking yourself, have I appropriately addressed these questions? So in reviewing your manuscript, when I review manuscripts, I read the abstract first. I'm trying to get a sense of what is happening and a mental image about what I am about to engage with. So your abstract has to have these things. The relevance is crystal clear, the abstract is self-contained, and its focus is on the overall findings. Remove any personal bias. You are not here to say whether this work is important. You are here to report on what you have done and what fields it makes a contribution to. The second thing that I would do is review your own references. What have you referenced in the development of this manuscript? Is there a clear perspective with a cohesive group of linked research? Or have you pulled bits and pieces from a bunch of different places? This is really going to send a signal to your potential reviewers because they will know the literature of the field. And your references should reflect that you also know the literature of the field. And just another note about identifying a journal. If you're referencing a journal repeatedly, that might be a good place to consider submitting your manuscript to. Be extra critical regarding your figures and your tables. The figure and the caption should stand alone. If you need a lot of text to explain the figure, you might not be presenting an idea that is appropriate to be presented as a figure. Be extra critical about your figures. Don't get married to like the pretty colors or the multi-beam maps. If it's not adding to your manuscript, take it out. Okay. The introduction, as we said already, should have these 5 things. The research problem, it must be in the format of the status quo and the disruptor. Stated and answerable research questions. You're anticipating the literature review, the gap you're going to fill, and a roadmap to how you're going to address this. I'm going to focus here on the methods on these sort of last 3, because these are the things where we see a lot of criticism in manuscripts. The control of your variables, addressing confounding features or rival hypotheses, and whether or not you have addressed enough angles on the question that you're asking to support the findings that you're making. The other thing, especially if you're doing qualitative or human subject research, can you walk yourself through as a participant what your methodology was based on what you have written. Make sure that the results answer the research questions you posed. And here in the results, this is probably the one part of the manuscript where more than is necessarily sufficient is probably okay, because this is an easy thing for the reviewer to say like, oh, I'm not sure you need to report this, like the story stands on its own. And in the discussion, this happens to everyone on every publication. You will throw in an idea that you so want to be true and is very, very charming to you, but is not supported by the data. The reviewers will identify this for you. They always do. Okay. My last tip is review your manuscript. Ask for support from your co-authors or your mentors or your colleagues. Ask for review in parts. If I come to you and I give you a 15-page manuscript and I say, oh, Dr. O'Shell, like, will you read through this? After his eyes finish rolling back in his head, he will probably say yes, but he's not going to be happy about it. If I go to Dr. O'Shell and I say, well, I have this abstract, I'm preparing it in a manuscript, it's 1 page. Can you read this 1 page and answer, like, do you get the significance? Does it address what you would expect to see in a manuscript? Does it make you curious about the manuscript? Can you read this 1 page for me? He will probably do it in front of me. Same thing with the figures. Separate them, ask individuals who you trust to look only at those things. Same thing with the references. Like, if you look at these references, can you tell what the manuscript is going to be about? Your colleagues will be much more willing and excited about reviewing small pieces of your work. And you should be able, as the author, to make the tie through the methods and the narrative of the story. But these are the critical elements where you really need immediate feedback. Okay. Very quickly, choosing a journal. You may start your research with a journal in mind. The only way you would do that is by knowing what the publication guidelines are of the journal before you start your research. You might use acceptance rates or impact factors. Think carefully about these features. They're all a little quirky. Don't assume that the journal that your mentor has always published in is the right journal for you. In fact, your research should be recognizably different from your mentor's research, so that may also be a note of caution. Somebody said in the chat earlier, you may start by submitting your journal to, a sort of aspirational, submitting your manuscript to an aspirational journal, and then use the feedback to improve your manuscript for a subsequent submission. And then lastly, responding to revisions. These are the categories of review that your manuscript is going to be subjected to. And I provide them here for you for analysis. And I can make these slides available to everyone. These are the things that might happen to you. Be rejected, major revisions, minor revisions, or accepted. Good luck for submitting your first draft and having it accepted. And use a table when you're responding to the revisions. So where did the comments come from? Here are the specific changes, and here are the pages where those changes are. Okay. So this is hard, and it can be unsatisfying. You started this work 5 years ago with, discovery in your heart. You have grinded through the research. you have written the publication, you feel like you have something to contribute, you throw it out to your colleagues in the submission of a manuscript, and that's when the pain really begins. So make sure that your motivations are clear and compelling and aligned. So if it's appropriate, think about how you conceptualize your research with a publication or a journal in mind. Pieces of grant applications end up being significant for publications, especially if there is a linked through line among all of your research. Work with a partner. Use self-imposed deadlines and tell someone what you intend to accomplish. There is nothing so effective as making sure you get something done than if you know somebody is going to ask you, like, hey, did you do this thing? And my last note, don't give up. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That was really great.
Thank you, Dr. Crockett. This is Nader. While I was listening your presentation, and I saw the only Dr. Rochelle submit the question, but I have some of other questions. You mentioned about importance of selection impact factor. So could you stress a little bit more about what exactly we need to pay attention when we submit our paper to it? Another thing is, does it matter, and does it matter about the structure when we submit it just a regular article versus a review article? It should be set up in different ways. Third one is that, okay, all of your slides concerns about article when it's written by one group or one person. What happens when there is a collaboration or even different institutions or representatives of different countries are providing some data? Because combining them is a little bit problem. So those are three questions that I selected.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Nader. So addressing impact factor, my personal opinion is that impact factor is a result of the appropriate journal, not a driving feature of where you should be attempting to publish. So the thing about the ISI journals is that they're all indexed and searchable based on sort of the categories and the different distributions of fields. And so making the effort to put something into this format is likely to give enough accessibility to your ideas and your discoveries and the new knowledge that it will be reachable by the people who would be interested in it. So the impact factor is the 2-year average of all of this, of like the number of citations for the articles published in the journal. And it can be confounded by self-citations within the articles. It can be confounded by other things. And so my recommendation is to, as a scholar, use what you know about where your research should go, rather than starting with impact factor and saying like, oh, I'm going to go to the like 4, the 8, or the 7 impact factor journal. So use your own intuition about what journals you're referencing in your publications and what you know about the field first, and then decide for yourself whether impact factor makes a difference to you. So that's the impact factor. The different formats for review and, let's say, like original discovery or hypothesis. So the tone of review articles is typically in the writing more conversational, But I would argue that if you map out sort of the thinking and the structure and sort of the, describing the significance, and here are the questions that were presented when we were doing this review, here's the method, here's how we interpreted, that the structure is actually similar enough that it doesn't hurt you to use a formal writing for publication approach. Even if you're doing a research article, at least it will help you organize your thinking as you move through it. Now, I appreciate that the sort of writing and the tone of review articles versus sort of discovery articles, I don't know what you would call the other type, can be different, but that's a difference in tone, in my opinion, not necessarily structure. And then the third question, if I can keep 3 questions, like co-writing publications or pulling together strands of data that may be from different instruments or different countries. So for me, and at least Dr. O'Shell knows this, I, as a PI, take an extraordinarily dictatorial approach. I say, like, you're gonna do this, I pull this. Like, different people have different levels of collaboration that they're comfortable with. I don't think that there's any, like, top line best practice that I can think of. It's just a very challenging thing to do. I personally, probably my co-authors, while they're going through the process, think I'm a little bit of a jerk, but we produce the publication, we produce the work. So that's the approach I take.
Thank you for your answer. There is one very interesting question, and it's relevant to Georgia reality. Does the age limit on reference, because we like to reference the hottest article, most relevant one, but what would you recommend to reference? The older work or the balanced approach?
Yeah, so your references should reveal to the reviewer what your foundational theoretical unit is. And if that includes, references in the mid-70s that, for example, describe lead-210 geochronology, I'm taking an example specifically from my field, then you include it. The question is not on the, like, actual timeline. The question is this part of a cohesive body of work that is relevant and significant and recognizable to the reviewers?
Thank you. I think there are a couple other questions submitted in written, but I will send you, and if you don't mind, please send to Georgia office and we can share it together with your presentation, because all of the participants, or almost all of them, are asking presentation to be shared.
Very good. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thanks for doing it. Okay, the next speaker, final speaker for today will be Eric Frost, who was a professor in geological sciences and now is a professor in Homeland Security. He's used geospatial and imaging tools to detect patterns that in time and space that he's used for multiple purposes, from finding oil in complex terrains to dealing with disasters, both human and natural disasters. He's currently working on the Mexican border with both countries to solve problems of natural resources, environmental impacts, education, and is working in several other countries with open source web services, combating human trafficking, the Internet of Things, 5G, AI, and so forth. So Eric basically, at least from when I first knew him, started in remote sensing and GIS, and still has used those capabilities to pick up patterns and deduce threats and solutions and advantages from that. So with Eric, I'll turn it over to you. With that, I'll turn it over to you. Eric is muted.
There, I think I'm unmuted now.
Okay, great.
I was trying to behave so that my dog didn't bark. I actually don't have a dog, but it wasn't barking. Thank you. It's very, very much a wonderful honor to be able to be involved in this. And one of the special honors is that as we're working with San Diego State, Georgia, I have the extraordinary privilege of working with Jalil. He and I traveled around Central Asia to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan 25 years ago now. So I had the incredible privilege of being able to work with Jalil in a whole bunch of countries. And to have him leading SDSU Georgia now is just a huge, huge, and incredible, wonderful thing. So it's my huge joy to connect to a friend for a long time. Other people that are on this call that are not in Georgia, a special friend and colleague, Dr. Alma Beatriz Navarro, is at UABC in Tijuana. And many of the things that we'll talk about were done with her. Also, Dr. Enrique Carrillo, also in Tijuana. Dan Gaddy. We have a special guest from the Naif Arab University of Security Science, Mamdouh, who's on here, and people from Avicenna University and others in Kabul, Afghanistan. So we're actually surrounding Tbilisi on all sides in a way of the point really is that we would like to collaborate. And so the point of this talk is really, it's about open source in one way, but the open source data is not the point. The point really, like with Jalil, the point are the collaborators and the collaborations that come from that. And then the glue is really how the people use those data sets. So as we actually go through here, just gonna hit a number of things of an enormous amount of data and things that we could actually do together. And then maybe write papers as John so wonderfully described. In being here, you can see a little bit that I'm sitting in the Viz Center here at San Diego State. Most of what we do here is we work with people in other parts of the world. So even though I'm in this room, I'm normally working mostly on disasters in places all around the world. So we're bringing in about 40 gigabits per second in terms of data. But nearly everything that we now do is in the cloud. It's in a bunch of different places around the world, and it's mostly with people. And so this whole thing is about how do we interact with people, and the data is kind of what we're doing, like using words. But it's really, the whole thing is really about relationships, which is what we're doing here. So in looking at it, our world has all changed, and will continue to change even more as we're now able to bring in billions of sensors, billions, and it will be going higher and higher with the general thing called the Internet of Things, Internet of Everything. It's really how do you measure something, bring it together, fuse it, visualize it, and then make a decision. And so we're now able to do that in absolutely staggering ways. And with this flood of data that's there, oftentimes called the exaflood from exabytes, but from the exaflood, you could say, what are all the things that we could discover? And then as John, that we could write about. Coming from San Diego, San Diego has an extraordinary power that we could hopefully bring to Tbilisi, as well as other places around the world. It's because Qualcomm is here. Qualcomm is the maker of most of the 5G chips. It's also, they have put AI on the chip. And so now 5G and AI really are the same thing. They're in the one piece. And as that chip is out there on phones, we'll be changing the world. San Diego has a huge advantage in that here's a place which you can actually interact with people trying to invent new things, invent new ways to solve problems that we could never solve before. So just another perspective. Here's a whole group of lights. You can actually see the very small lights of Tbilisi. You can wave and I can't see you, but you can see that Mamdouh is to the south of you in Riyadh. Several people are to the east of you in Kabul. Mexico is way to the west, but as you're looking at all these lights represent people. All of those lights also probably represent sensors. And so how do you actually interact with people? How do you solve problems that we could never solve before? Because until we had the perspective of MODIS taking images at night, we didn't have any sense of that. So as an example, how many of us have done anything with the MODIS images that were taken last night of you, where you are, wherever you are in the world? So there were at least 2 images taken last night that are now publicly available on the web. Seeing going, well, there's about a dozen images taken yesterday of where you are that are publicly available on the web. And you can sort of go, there's so much information that it can now allow us to ask questions that we could never ask before. So as an example of just a variety of open source data sets. So here's looking at Georgia, the valley that Tbilisi's in. And here's something that there's about a half a dozen of my Homeland Security students on the call, and they have been working on fires. So here is the global imaging of fires. And every one of those dots was imaged in the last 12 hours. That there is a fire, and you can go down to the metadata for each one of them. You can tell how hot it is, a whole variety. And then the change that takes place is huge of where is it going? What is it doing? When Walt lived here in San Diego area, he lived in the back country that has just had a horrific fire season this year. So Walt's probably really glad he's in Italy, not here, because the fire season in California has, and the major way that we actually can look at this and do things with it is to look at the changes through time of imaging the entire world and what's taking place. And then you could do things like Walt does with climate change, that it's not just the detection of the smoke. Here is the detection right next to Los Angeles. It's detection from a camera from Mount Wilson, looking at the flames burning right next to Los Angeles. And so we now in all of California have hundreds of cameras that can let you look at anything almost, and then not only detect what's in the sky, but you can now directly look at it. And rather than just looking at it, the next several set of slides, they're actually just tweets. So the information, in a way of sharing the information, of building a network of collaborators, is that during a disaster, you know where the data are, so you can just go look at it, put it in on Twitter, and send it out. And interestingly, during a disaster, Twitter ends up being one of the most dramatically useful ways of actually sharing information. And you can go, it's free. It actually will be read way more than any publication that almost any of us ever write. Often it takes like 20 seconds to write one. And sometimes they get translated around where you realize that what you did just saved somebody's life. And so the motivation for doing this, the connections, the ways of doing things can be so just a couple of tweets of this earlier this month. So this was the fire near Los Angeles. Here is the satellite imaging. All of the red dots are detections in the last 12 hours from the same satellites that go over the entire world. So they imaged all of Georgia as well. And as they're displayed, they're publicly displayed, we have been very deeply involved in how to speed up the processing so that it's made available, and then you can go down and look at it, and you can actually go get the image as well. But the major thing that you're actually looking at is the change. So you can see where is it burning and where is it not. And so black is out, red, and interestingly, the same colors as San Diego State. But sharing this on Twitter then ends up being a very powerful way of functionally publishing the ideas. Putting more data together, here is a website that's been put together. It's at UCSD and the Supercomputer Center where it's hosted and built, called Wi-Fire. It's a National Science Foundation project, is putting real data together on location. And one of the fires, the Zog fire, was burning the city of Reading. And then the fire on the left of here, the August complex, is the largest fire ever in California, more than 1 million acres. So as it burned, where is it going? What is it going to do? Is it going to burn me? How do you respond? How do you put it out? All of those are things that universities are very deeply involved in sharing and helping to drive decisions. And a very simple thing that can be done, if you build it into it, now every one of these has the near real-time weather. So the weather is within 15 seconds of real time. And so you put it in, and the major thing that the tweet you can see is doing, the tweet is just helping somebody as a set of directions. You can do this. And so what happens in this oftentimes is that somebody reads this and they go, I can do this. I can go accomplish something. And so when there's a fire, oftentimes the major thing that's built are collaborators and collaborations have been built with the open source data. And that's something that a university can do in a powerful way of just putting the architecture together, and then it's just completely automatic. So doing that, where there is smoke, there's fire, and where there is fire, there is smoke. And so one of the kinds of things that when you actually look at air quality around a fire, it's often horrible. Well, you can look at air quality around the entire world all the time in almost real time. So here is the air quality yesterday. And you can see that Pakistan was awful. An interesting part of this, though, the only thing that's listed are major cities. And so you can look at this and see some of the people that are here are from Kabul, Afghanistan. You can see that yesterday, Kabul was the 4th worst city in the world, major city. And down at the bottom, yesterday, Riyadh was the 21st worst in the world. San Diego is not in the top 1,000. So that's really good. But this changes hourly, very, very simply. And so for looking at it, if you looked at, this was yesterday in Georgia. So yesterday, Tbilisi was, today, what was today for you was apparently dramatically different. But you can look around Georgia and adjacent places, and there were places where it was 110, 102, but also 49. So the detail of what's here, we can now measure in near real time, and then you can also look at the fires that are there. And so you start to, in a scientific way of cause and effect, looking at it, where's it going, what's the topography, which way is the wind blowing? All the group of things of taking multiple open source data sets, putting them together, and then you can understand what's going on. So as an example, a larger view, here is the air quality yesterday for the area from India to Saudi Arabia and then off to Africa. And actually nearly all of the junk that's in the air was generated in India. And it was generated there, the wind blows, and so it blows over to Oman, Yemen, Djibouti, and then out into the Atlantic Ocean, and some of it blows over to the US because the air masses go that far. As you look at this, we now can measure this in real time almost. It's processed and made available in real time. And then you could ask the question, what problems could you solve using these data, but what collaborations might you have? So maybe as an example, if you look at India on here, look north of India, it's up in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, where Halil and I spent time. And you're going, so what's up there? Those are Kyrgyzstan, I mean, there's mountains up there, there's nothing up there that would produce maybe a fire. Well, here's another view from Bentuski, which my students have gotten really good at doing. where you're now measuring it, and there you can actually touch it and you can get the value. So the value is 340, so almost twice what it was as the worst city. And that you see actually when you look at it in a larger view, it's functionally pollution blowing in the wind out of China over Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and towards Georgia. So the air quality in Georgia, you can go, oh, so how much of it comes from China? And as you actually start to look, the interrelationships of what's there, the health effects of what's there, the variety of things, all of a sudden become something that you can actually do. And we'll get to it in another way to say, this is just to be clear, this is a snapshot of a point in time. What could we now do with science that's not a point in time? So another way, you saw that was stuff coming from China going towards Georgia, towards Saudi Arabia, towards, that was at the surface. But the Earth's atmosphere has more than one layer. And so if you actually went up to the jet stream now is not going east to west. The jet stream is from the area in the Black Sea, Caspian Sea. The jet stream is going exactly the opposite way. So at about 60,000 feet, huge jet stream flow that's shooting off towards China. The jet stream will change noticeably between when I start this talk and when I stop. So it changes that much. And you could look at very small things like radiation from something would often go up there, and that's how it would move. So we often look at that. This is all in the earth.nullschool.net within 3 hours of real time for the entire world every day. So of looking at other things that we can do, we can look at the Caspian, Black Sea, Mediterranean, Red Sea, and this is looking at sea surface temperature. You can see very significant temperature change. Walt has put a lot of effort into looking at the temperature changes and the implications for carbon within that. As you look at this, the desire as you see the data is, can I get better data? Can I learn more? This changes many, many times a day because it's of all the 45 or so satellites that are being used. Here's the link for all of these. And as you look at this, maybe look down towards the very south end of Iran, the Gulf. You can see the spin patterns that are there. The spin patterns, so there's an oil spill. There's a whole variety of things that you might look at. But if you looked at a place that's closer to the Black Sea, an interesting part of what's there, it's not a big blue thing. It's that you look at it and there are spin patterns that are defined by algae. And that as you look at it, this again is a snapshot. And a very interesting thing that you could just say, instead of a snapshot, what if I had a movie? What if I took all of the images that are collected of every place in the world, and I actually made a movie of how the Black Sea is moving? That's totally possible. And you can do it even more so that here is a video, or here's a algal bloom in the Baltic Sea, and look at what's in you can see the black lines, and you can see at the end is a ship. So those are the ships moving through the algae. That ship has a whole bunch of sensors on it. So could we link the global transportation system as sensors with what's there, and this being imaged from space? The enormity of the data that are there really suggest that there is a staggering, say as an example, how would you reduce the carbon footprint of these ships? You can go, well, they're just cutting through the water in a straight line, A to B straight line. Well, what if you went not A to B in a straight line? Let them go so that they're actually going with the current. So they're going not shortest distance, they're going shortest carbon footprint. And we actually can look at that and map it in real time, and the ship can be giving information back in real time. Absolutely possible, because the ships are giving information back in real time all the time, and we can go measure it, and that's an open source data set. So if you just looked at, I was looking at Georgia at about 6 o'clock this morning. And this is the wind in the area, and you can see the wind is blowing up the major valley that Tbilisi is in, and then so from the Caspian to the Black Sea. So to look at this, you can say, you can mouse over any place and it gives you the value. The power of this when there is a fire is absolutely staggering. So you can say, here's what's going on, and down at the bottom, there is a timeline. So what you can do is commonly go out 5 days in advance to plan on, here's what's going to take place. So you can say, at this afternoon, the wind is going to be going this way, so this is when we fight the fire, or it's going to be doing this. And so this is now the tool that's used. Instead of go fight the fire, it's go fight the fire when the wind is the right way, when it's not the wrong way, when it's doing. And so this becomes a tool that is profoundly powerful to help all sorts of people. It's used really widely in California now because it's just become known. It could be used around the world. Exactly the same data are available. They're all free. It actually works. You can put the fires and the winds together in one, and you're going, oh my God, I actually see what's likely to take place during the next 5 days. So all of that would be very much like looking at an engine. So we're looking at the Earth as if it's all these pieces that fit together and they work together very much like a car engine does, except the Earth is actually way more sophisticated. A way that you can now look at something that might be something that may be from the collaborators and the collaborations that this is really about is here's there are several people that are wearing the Microsoft HoloLens 2. So the HoloLens is actually probably more powerful than most of the computers that we use as laptops. So what's on the side of the head is where the computer is. What the person is seeing is a whole series of things that are being shown into their retina. So they're seeing in stereoscopic 3D, augmented reality, mixed reality, and then the power of that is they're able to collaborate because it's going from them to something else, from something else to them. And so you could look at this and going, you could do this for an engine. And so this is a Microsoft tool it works absolutely incredibly well. But as you would look at that, how might we do this for the science of what's going on, where we're looking at massive data, but then going to multiple places around the world? So as an example, and the thing that strikes me the most, the woman that's in the picture here is the expression on her face. It's because when I was up at Microsoft a while ago and I was using it, and I could see that the expression on people's face is one of absolute intensity because you are seeing a whole series of things that aren't actually there. The guy in the background is actually showing her exactly what to do, and his hands are appearing to her in front of what's there. And so this is a tool for collaboration between here in Georgia, here in Afghanistan, here in Saudi Arabia. This totally works. And you can say, how might we do things with the tools that are becoming available and link it to also things with 5G and AI? So a powerful use of this that I was one of the things that I did, and I was just stunned. Here's a doctor, he took the vertebrae. He just reached in and he took the vertebrae out of the person's, there's no person there, but it absolutely looks like there's a person there. And that all the pieces you can pick up, make bigger, make smaller, just like on your phone, you make it bigger or smaller, same thing. You're actually looking at it, it's in 3D, you're trying to figure out how exactly what's wrong, what's doing it. This is an extraordinary tool to take a three-dimensional object like the Earth, all the different layers and pieces from way up in the sky to way down in the mountain and way inside. How does it actually work? How do we put the data together? We could do that with collaborators and collaborations, and San Diego State, Georgia, San Diego, and related schools might absolutely be the ones to do it. So as an example, this works so sweet, it's just amazing. So here the person is wearing it, he's got something just like we do with our phones, he's just making it bigger or smaller. It works incredibly, it looks absolutely like it's in front of you, that it's real. And so you can say for engineering, and so the number of things that are going into Tbilisi with engineering, this is outrageously powerful. And so you're going, so how do we actually do things with the new technologies that are coming? You can go even further to now the thing that's called holoportation. That here's a person in another company's, it's called a holoportation booth. And you look at the person in there, it's just actually a whole series of cameras that are projecting the person you're in another one, and you look like you're absolutely sitting there in 3 dimensions talking to that other person. And it could be that you capture it and you're talking to somebody that's not around anymore, that died, or somebody in all sorts of ways. How this mixed reality works, and how it works, especially with open source data sets that are staggeringly huge, is something that we could actually all do together. So Microsoft is really the champion of holoportation. And they have a number of videos that are shown here. The one on the right of the one of the principal investigators' young daughter is absolutely brilliantly done, where you have some of the same objects. Like here is a very expensive object from Costco. It's a bottle of water. If I have this in my place and you have it in your place, we both have the same object, and that you build everything around these shared objects. So looking at that, you could say, here's another object, and it's one that probably none of us are going to go visit. The prophet's birthday is the 29th, so 2 days from now. If you made a holoportation, if you made a view of that with that, how many people do you think might be interested in going and visiting? Especially with COVID-19, people can't go there. Where are all the places people can't go? And could San Diego State, Georgia, partner universities, could we be collecting the library of things to let you go visit where you can't go? Other places that you can't go or may not want to go, here is Mount Ararat. This is on the Iran-Turkey border. And Iran's probably not the best place for somebody who's a US citizen to go to. One of our Homeland Security students actually went there and spent 11 months in an Iranian intelligence prison until he finally got out and then finished the program. But if you were a geoscientist, this is a valley that you would be very interested in because this is what occurred. This is a whole series of earthquakes that are right exactly on the border of Iran and Turkey. You can't go there very easily. And even more so, you can't go the 10 kilometers into the ground where these took place. And so to try to look at, could you actually go there? You absolutely could with some of the tools to look at open source data. This is X, Y, Z, and then through time data. And yet we don't look at it that way. So we look at a bunch of dots. What's the pattern? If you see somebody dancing, you see the pattern. If you see me dancing, you see there's no pattern because I can't dance. But you can look at earthquakes. Is the when did it take place? What's the beat? What's happening? How is the earth dancing in a sense? How is the motion being transferred from one to the next? We actually don't know most of those things because we constrain ourselves to look at data like this as dots on a map. And yet the data are there, the metadata are there to animate it, to do it through time. Same idea of, this is downtown Los Angeles. And a story just came out yesterday. Total surprise after a major earthquake that took place there. The shaking in these buildings, in many of them, was 4 times greater than the design that they had designed for. And so as SDSU Georgia is doing construction engineering and going, okay, these buildings, the very first time somebody ever went and measured the building with an accelerometer to see how much it's moving, all of a sudden they go, they didn't use this phrase, but it's sort of, oh my God, they used much different phrase. They were going, we designed for earthquakes that the earthquake and the ridge crest is a ways away. The earthquake that took place here had 4 times the shaking impact that they had designed. And other parts of LA had almost no impact because they figured out that they had always thought that the deep area would be more. Completely wrong. So this just got published yesterday. As it got published, people are going, could you in a building design sensors so that you're actually measuring things in real time and you're seeing what's actually happening instead of downtown LA is actually built. And as it's built, it will fall down. So in another way, here's a sensor network in a a very simple way of the sensors is just a Raspberry Shake. It's just a small computer. It's an open source. It's now around the world. And if you look, doesn't look like there's anything in Georgia, but you can go, so this is like $120 for the whole device. And then you were in a network, and the power isn't the device. The power are the people and the network, because those sensors for downtown LA came from this network. It didn't come from the network of things on the ground, the USGS. So of looking at it, other things that they show that people hadn't seen. This is the COVID-19 reduction of the noise on the earth. So as everything was locked down from COVID, all of a sudden there's no trains running, there's no buses running, the freeways, and these sensors are able to look at what took place in March. All of a sudden there's a drastic reduction in the noise of the world. The one place that went up is residential, because that's where we are. And so interestingly, these small little cheap things are able to discern the fact that the noise in the earth has gone down, and it's gone down. Here's a list of cities. It's gone down in all of these cities, and look at the relationship of wham, it all stopped at the same time almost. So that you're actually looking at the relationship of motion and COVID measured by a really inexpensive seismic device. What are the array of things that we could do in a profound way to also do it when we also add 5G and AI? A way of, this is kind of silly, but a way that many of you are already familiar with this. This is two guys, they're called Slow-Mo Guys. They make a series of videos on YouTube. The most powerful part of this, look at the number on the bottom of the page. This video has been watched 16 million times. How many of us have ever written something that's been read 16 million times? The answer is probably obvious. And you're going, so interestingly, what they did was they used time as a tool. And the tool they used was to photograph things and then slow it way down so that you could see it. So they're mostly using photography that's at 2,500 frames a second or 10,000 frames a second, and then slowing it down so that you can see it. And so they're doing science, they're doing STEM, like how would you look at a building moving at 2,500 frames a second? We don't do that. Here's what they see. They put paint on a speaker, an acoustic speaker that's just sitting there. And this is absolutely beautiful. I'll send the slides out to anybody that wants them. I'll send them to Jalil and Walt and Anna so that they can send them to, but this is a YouTube video that's really worth watching, because you're watching like a second, but you're watching it at 2,500 frames a second, and you're seeing the science of material science working in ways that you absolutely, totally impossible to see with our eyes. But by doing it in a way, you can say, what could we do with this in terms of teaching and learning remotely? And this one video, 18 million views. With their other videos, I think there are over 100 million people that have watched their videos. So now they make money out of doing this. Could we do the same thing? So here is paint. And you see the paint moving in the incredible elegance, the way of, here's what sound, an acoustic response. And you can go, well, this is actually also the acoustic response that's going on inside your head when you're doing things. But you're going, there's a massive number of things that we can do, and maybe taking an indication just from the Slow-Mo guys of something that actually really works, and how could we move this into the science that we do. Another one that's a really famous thing that was done a long time ago now by Dr. Edgerton was to drop a drop of milk into milk. So probably all of you have done that. And milk just shows better, but all of you have dropped the drop of coffee in coffee because it's the last drop you're dumping in. I do that every morning, and I think about this every morning. If you photograph this in the same really fast, this is the milk crown. This is the physics of what actually takes place. So can you explain it? This takes place with every dot, with every drop. It's absolutely extraordinarily elegant for how our world works. And yet, as you look at this, look at a COVID drop dropping on a surface is going to do exactly this if it goes into a flow. So you can look at it and going, there's a whole huge array of things, and then you look at the surface area that's there is dramatically greater than what it started out as. A really simple thing that you can do, and maybe taking from John's, if you have a piece of paper draw a raindrop. Just draw a raindrop. And you're going, well, what does a raindrop look like? And our classic idea of a raindrop, it's really thin on the top and it comes down and is big. And that is absolutely, totally the example of bad science. This person, Alistair Fraser from Penn State, has a whole web page about this, of that is horrible science. That's horrible science. That's not how it works at all. The drop coming down is what happens when a drop comes out of a faucet and it's hanging on, and just before it leaves, you have that little point, and then it pops down and it's a circle. And as it falls, it's falling through air, so it flattens. When it flattens, it catches air and it goes into, functionally, it looks like a, as it's breaking up here. So here's a drawing that Dr. Fraser put on about 10 years ago as an example of, this is one of the worst kinds of science as an example. And yet we always think about rain as that because rain is too small and it's going too fast for us to look at. But you actually can look at it really easily now. Some of you have probably jumped out of an airplane in a building where you can now jump, and you're in a building where there's a fan that's blowing up. And so you jump and you're hand gliding, but you're in a building. They have one in New York City they're trying to convert, and they can't convert it to homes. But in that, think of what it also does. The air is blowing up, so now the raindrops are sitting there so that you can look at them and you can see how they change from here. So all of a sudden you're going, dude, like I can see that. What if you did the same thing as the slow-mo guys? How does rain fall? It falls in Tbilisi and in Kabul, in Tijuana, the same as it falls here. But yet our knowledge of it is really small, and our knowledge of a whole huge array, how might we do that where the collaborations and the collaborators are really around open source data like this. Another last couple of slides. We have something in the San Diego, Tijuana area that's absolutely fantastic, and it's the US-Mexico border. Georgia has borders. Afghanistan has borders. Saudi Arabia has borders. In looking at borders, how might we take all of these kinds of things for science and turn it into something that could actually, the border here just for Otay Mesa is about $70 billion a year in trade. It's also, in August, it was $53 million in drugs that were seized. So how can you use science on a border to really enhance in a whole series of ways, and the way that works the best? And Dr. Alma Beatriz Navarro is on the call. Her university symbol is there, UABC, that we collaborate with. So here's the border. This looks like borders all around the world. $70 billion is actually a lot of money. How could you actually make that go faster and better, especially with things like 5G and AI? San Diego, if you could get rid of the water in the ocean, and I hate swimming, so getting rid of the water would be probably, but it has faults offshore that are almost identical to Georgia, except we can't get to them because they're under several thousand feet of water. So we could actually learn about San Diego from the faults in Georgia. How do you instrument them? What's taking place? How is it moving? So very much we are very related to each other, and the collaborations that are possible are extraordinary. So a way of, Qualcomm has what their chip, major chip is called the Snapdragon. If you put the Snapdragon on a truck, on a phone, on all the different kinds of things, the dramatic impact that can have on trucks, but of also the dramatic impact it could have on, put it on now on a, not on a truck, put it on a building, put it on an animal, put it on a whole series of different kinds of things. And the amount of data that could come back is absolutely staggering. Another thing that Georgia has is oil and gas pipelines. We have a major one here, crosses into Mexico, and you look at that and going, the censoring of this pipeline so that it doesn't break or what it's doing, absolutely, it would be an example of people doing it here to say, how does this work? And then let's go try to do it in places like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakh. I worked a lot on the Kazakh Caspian pipeline. The pipeline that's being built now going underneath Mediterranean is another one. So last slide, making a border work better could profoundly draw us together because we all have them, they're all different, but we could do things with technology and science as collaborators and collaborations. And we have one that we would love to work on. We have Qualcomm here, we have a whole group of Homeland Security students and students in Baja. It's going out in pollution. Unfortunately here, the pollution goes to where our Navy SEALs do their training, and about 170 days a year, you can't swim. How you would do this also with drone imagery, you start to see that you put massive data together and it can actually make a difference. And in a way that draws much of this together, that's totally changing our world, is 5G. So as 5G is, here's just a short called a game change, this is going to change science as well. How do you make a building a 5G building? One really simple way, a hallway where hallway comes down to another hallway at a 90-degree angle is a disaster because 5G doesn't go around corners. But if you make it a curve, all of a sudden the hallway becomes a waveguide. And so how do you design a building so that it's transparent, that it enhances it? So that's not, so as we look at our world is changing, how might we collaborate with each other to detect earthquakes, buildings, fires, all sorts of kinds of things, and put it into the context of the broad group of things, artificial intelligence that sort of has changed down to machine learning and deep learning. And you can see the timeline there. That right now, what this really means is opportunity. There is a profound opportunity to do things, including with the Microsoft HoloLens. And much of this can have the end effect that what President De La Torre has championed of her 3 phrases to make our students global citizens, compassionate leaders, and ethical innovators. How could we do that and do it with an international flair that's really powerful? And I think the extraordinary character of SDSU Georgia and its partners there, the main campus here and our partners in places like the Naif Arab University for Security Science, Afghanistan, and especially Mexico, Thailand. This is really something that we can make collaborations and make collaborators where the people like Jalil and President De La Torre, they are the glue that are enabling us to do things really well that we could never do before in partnerships. So in doing that, that can be something that the International Affairs, Dr. Christina Alfaro, have really championed something called Collaborative Online International Learning, or COIL, as a means of sharing. And so you could say COIL could be sort of the championship of how do we interact with each other? How do we do things that have never been done? How do we look at something at 2,500 frames a second and all of a sudden go, oh my God, that's how it works. No one had ever done that. And we're trying to discover things. The slow-mo guys are making a wonderful living out of it. How could we do this? And then the 3 universities that are here that are on the line, maybe what we can say is the internet is how we're able to do this. The internet day is the 29th of this month. So Thursday. So you could say, so what could we do as a group, as in COIL, of collaboratively online international, and it has to be online because we can't travel. It's and how do we discover things? How do we make it so that it's out at the bottom of the ocean? It's at 60,000 feet. It's in all these other places. A lot of the kinds of things Walt has done of very, very far removed places, and yet instrumenting and being able to understand things that we never would have understand otherwise. So thank you very much. Anybody that would like the slides, just send me an email and I'm happy to send them to you, and I'll also send them to Walt and Jalil if they wanted to. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has some.
Thank you, Dr. Frost, for your wonderful presentation. I have a couple of questions. I'm not a seismologist or geophysicist, but as I know, you're tracking the earthquakes and in Caucasus as well. Any recent data on the recent earthquake in Georgia? Do you have any, or can we track it out? Because why I'm saying this, because one of the center for earthquake detection is located at Ilia State University Center of Seismology. So it would be good to see any potential collaboration between San Diego State University and Ilia State University. Another one, same is about observatory. As I know, the San Diego State has the Mount Palomar Observatory, and Georgian University, ISU, also has the one in Abastumani. So it would be interesting to have some kind of scientific collaboration, these two universities, and same TSU can join here and GTU and as well. So thanks.
Sure. Or maybe I'll take them in reverse order. In Victorian England, because Britain was all around the world, they had a phrase that the sun never sets on the British flag. We helped set it over here, but in a group of astronomers have a related saying now, and they said the saying is, the sun never rises on our network. So people that are looking at the stars, they don't want the sun, they want the other side of the world. And so a very powerful thing that's done is, if you're looking at something, is to go from observatory to observatory so that you can continue looking at it. And then the observatory that you are most interested in are the ones on the opposite side of the world. And so what you're suggesting for observatories linking, that is a very powerful way of doing it. And absolutely, especially for teaching, that would be a wonderful way to link all of the information from our observatory here, as well as from Mount Palomar, comes down in a wireless network. It's the same network that's carrying all of the fire information and also all of the earthquake information. So all of the earthquake data that comes into UCSD, all is coming on that exact same network. So that would be a model for doing exactly the same thing. And it's about 0.4 of a second from Georgia to San Diego on fiber optics. So you can say, putting the data together and looking at them, that would be a wonderful application of that. And then it's linking people together that have the wonderful attribute of we're on opposite sides of the world. And so when it's daytime here, you can't teach about astronomy because the sun is out, but you could be looking at the observatory there, and vice versa. For the earthquakes, there is a group of people in California and now over a large part of the world that has dramatically changed the sort of the insight into earthquakes. And the slides, there was a little symbol up there that said Temblor. Temblor is a group of geophysicists. They also have a free app that lets you look at where you are, what the danger is. The Temblor group of people have decided that instead of studying about them in the historical academic way, they're going to study about them much like your question is, what is the danger? What should we do now? What's going on? And so the Temblor group of people would be absolutely the stars too. They have a newsletter that comes out after nearly every major earthquake. They are the first ones to put information out. And so posing the question to them, there's a group of so that's what the Iran-Turkey data, that was from them. So to do that, my guess is absolutely, if you started to have more data, we now go down to about a -4 in terms of earthquakes that are widely recorded. So you can go, we know way more about what's going on than we used to know, just because there's so much more data, and that we linked data like the shaking in a city to another place, so we see the directionality and we see that the shapes are dramatically different than we ever thought. So maybe an analogy, probably all of us looking at earthquakes, the idea of throwing a stone into the water and watching the earthquake waves go out, that isn't actually very good science at all, because things move according to the velocity and they move according to the direction that the earthquake moved. They don't move out in a circle. And so oftentimes to try to look at it, looking at it with sensors, the earthquake can be sensed, and then all of the sensing devices around it can be notified, and you can discern, here in California at least, in less than 2 seconds where the earthquake is going, where the damage is likely to be greatest, and then alerts can be sent out, and you are dramatically faster than the earthquake wave. That's really profoundly just a matter of an Internet of Things application that works extremely well and is really inexpensive. So that absolutely, to look at that problem and to say, Georgia could probably get a much better insight into what's there. And the easiest way is to collaborate with some other people that are doing it. Because this is, Georgia is a world-class plate boundary. So it's a great place to do something.
Okay, and here I'd like to ask the question what Dr. Rochelle just submitted. What do you think, Dr. Frost, are the 3 most fertile areas of collaboration between SDSU and Georgian universities?
And I think the best kind of collaboration really is between individual people. And so as an example, Jalil and I might collaborate on Central Asia. So it's not even in Georgia. But you could say the kind of collaboration that's there is really where there's a lot of data being collected. And then who would use it? So as an example, an enormous amount of data is being collected of Georgia every day from groups like planet.com. And they're then trying to use it for looking at change detection. My guess is nobody's doing something there with that. But it would be the kinds of things that would really be not really the topic as much as who are people that want to collaborate. Because if you're collaborating with somebody that doesn't really want to collaborate, usually not very much happens, which we've all, but sort of to say who's, and that's actually where this millennial grant, the bringing of people over to San Diego State, so you get to, that is of such extraordinary importance. And one of the things that I was just talking to one of my students about is the huge thing of San Diego State students here going to Georgia for study abroad. And that could be, maybe as an example, we could send students over there that know a lot about fire imaging. The geology department could do a lot about earthquakes. So might look at things that are, the things that I work on are largely disasters. And Georgia, thankfully, is in a place where you have far fewer than nearly everybody around you.
Okay, but in this case, let me convert my question a little bit. You presented data about US-Mexico boards and what can be specifically applied to the borders between Georgia and the neighbors. The same model or same study, what you just presented between US border, California border, and Mexico border. How we can, use that or translate in our realities.
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably everybody that's driving a truck that's crossing the border has a phone. So everybody's got a phone. Probably most people that are walking have a phone. And so what you're really saying is, okay, how can we use the phones to enable a whole series of things that can be like the identity of where you are, the where specifically you're going, what you're doing, where you're going to. So you're actually using the phone as a device and asking the questions, how can I get across the border faster? So as a very simple example here, when you cross the border and you show up at the border, are you trying to hide your identity? And you're going, Evans, no, absolutely. Here's my passport. And I'm going across, and you're going, well, so can you put something in the phone and it's doing iris detection that absolutely it's your phone. You walk up there and you cross the border in 5 seconds. And you're going, so that's actually a very simple app with the iris detection because it's used for, and then to look at the truck. where the truck can also be something that the sensors that are on the truck can also help speed it up, so that like there's a number of pictures of trucks crossing from Syria into Turkey, where they're taking 3 days for obvious reasons. But you can go, okay, so something that you're trying to say, this is what I'm bringing, this is what's here, here's how much it weighs, here's where it came from, here's where it's going. Instead of handing the guard a piece of paper or a whole bunch of pieces of paper, what's being done here is to try to do all of that completely electronically, and then you're just putting identity, and identity equals permission. And so it really ends up being that you're using the technology, and then to look through it and to try to discern where is there fraud, where is there something that's not correct. And the easiest way of doing that is just imaging it and looking at density, or what a dog smells. So Mexico-US is absolutely an extraordinary border, and the intellectual property there could go out to places all around the world in saying this is how we actually can make the trade faster and more appropriate. So I think the two, San Diego State here and San Diego State there, and our other partners, I think absolutely you could look at this and go, the same thing that you would do for instrumenting a building to make sure that it's built the right way and it's not, nothing is going wrong with it. You're just instrumenting a thing, and instrumenting a truck or a person absolutely works wonderfully in those same ways.
Thank you, Dr. Frost. I think this is all the questions submitting so far. Walt, would you like to add anything?
Oh, just a great presentation, Eric. Thanks. I guess we got to all the questions for you. Oh, you must have taken the challenge from John and not gone over your time. Thanks. Thanks for being
I actually have 10 more slides, but we'll stop there.
Oh, okay. And I think if there were some questions for John that didn't get answered, we'll, as I said, we'll try and get those answered and posted. Thank you for your presentation, and all the, John had to leave for another meeting, but thanks to all the participants. Watch for future mini courses and information on the various exchanges to be coming your way. And also, if you have any ideas, and you could send them on chat now, but if you have any ideas on Eric's point that the best collaborations are person-to-person collaborations, we're trying to build those and make those happen. But if you have any specific ideas on how to make that happen faster, more efficiently, please pass them on to me or Jalil, and we'll start getting that implemented. It's I think even harder during the COVID times to make new bridges and collaborations, but there are so many, as Eric said, there's so many opportunities for collaboration and so many similarities between the countries in terms of topography and seismology and marine coast and great people and great wines, great food. We really need to build those partnerships and strengths. So with that, I think I will, unless Jalil, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would like to maybe thank everyone and point out that the fact that we're here, STSU Georgia is here, even though office is closed now, but we can be the bridge to connect you to the main campus on the creating collaborative research, etc. So please feel free to write to me, or you can write to the office. So STSU Georgia, we will serve as a facilitator for future collaboration. So we're hoping that in the next couple of years that we have on this contract, on this project with the embassy on building research capacity, we can have some examples of actual joint research projects between San Diego State and partners in Georgia. At this time, it's supposed to be in STEM, but in other areas, non-STEM areas, we're also here to find ways of creating opportunities for collaboration. So please feel free to write to me or contact us. And we'll try to design a second mini series, and maybe it will be a coil this time, as soon as Walt decides on the topics. Or if you have some suggestions as to what kind of additional things you'd like to see, please let us know. Nodar?
Yes, I would like to ask San Diego colleagues to have the next presentations related to the scientific methodologies and approaches, about scientific ethics, about authorship, plagiarism, falsification of data, record keeping, public domain data availability, about library use, using of library resources available, using electronic publication and databases, and the same stuff, which is good for our young researchers to keep in mind, because this is a hot topic in Georgia. And I think this also the oral presentation, ethics of presentation, scientific English, scientific writing, citations, figures and diagrams, those are the topics that would be good to have in the next series of presentations. This is what I would like to add.
Good. Thanks very much, Nodar. I think those are all topics that we have on our list, but we should prioritize, we will prioritize based on what's most needed and most helpful. I would also like to suggest to the participants and to anyone in Georgia to look at SDSU faculty and see if there are particular people that would make a good match with you, or if you're a student, your major professor, or for you as a student to work with. We have a number of ways to build the collaboration and support the collaboration. And it can be everything from doing research in Georgia, as I said, to coming to the US and doing it. When you're in the US, you can be enrolled in Georgia, you can be enrolled at San Diego State. So we have a lot of options, but what we really need are the specific partnerships, which the minimum is the major professor or mentor in Georgia, the major professor or mentor in the US, and the student. And so I would encourage people to look at, in their discipline and their area of interest, at our faculty and at the research. I think most faculties have pretty good web pages, and the Web of Science that is mentioned is a good way to sort of track people down in their papers. And if you find those links, Jalil and I and Eric are more than willing to build those bridges and make those collaborations happen and be effective. So that's your homework. Okay, I think that if there's no other comments or questions, I think that we'll close. We're a little bit early, which is good. That's doesn't happen very often. And I really thank all the presenters, the embassy and MCA personnel, and particularly the participants. Thanks very much, and we'll be in touch with the next series of courses. So thank you.
And we will share the presentations to audience as soon as possible.
Yeah, John has already sent his slide deck, so I think we'll have the presentations available, as well as the recording of the whole session, right?
I'll send mine right now.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and looking forward to meet all of you in next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.